Okay.
Now let's not take too long because one, my wife wants me back, and two, I've listened to your guys' podcast.
What?
I know
I
how
am
long you go.
offended, sir.
Oh, it just takes me like 3 days at the rate I can listen to them to actually get through one.
I know.
Uh,
I listen to the Intellivisionaries podcast, and it takes me literally till the next edition comes out before I can manage to finish it.
yeah, yours is the only one I listened to so far. I haven't had time to get into more. I don't want to waste gas. I listen to it in the car when I drive my baby around to put him to sleep at night because he refuses any other way.
Yeah.
And I just think Al Gore probably is going to come murder me one day. So
Right. Today is May 23rd, 2014. This is Kevin Savitz. I am interviewing Bill Kendrick, who is in his office at Smashwords in Davis, California. Hey, Bill.
hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. I just had a wisdom tooth out, so if I have massive pain in the middle of the interview, you'll know why. So
Because I'm interviewing you. That causes that problem for a lot of people.
seething pain.
Ah, my tooth.
Gotta run.
Yes. Okay, so ostensible reason that we are talking is Atari Party, which
Yes, indeed.
you are the father of Atari Party. Tell me all about it. Go.
Oh, okay. So, backstory: I'm a big Atari guy, and one year I saw that Vintage Computer Festival was happening. It was the sixth one. I'd never heard of it prior to that. I saw this big ASCII graphics post on some random Usenet group that I was on, probably CompSys Old Computers or something like that. Something that wasn't the Atari one that I normally hung out on, which is where I met you. And I saw, among the PDPs and IBM laptops from 1980 or whatever, I saw a Commodore 64, an Apple II, but no Atari. So I said, well, let me set this straight. So I basically invited myself. I think I had to pay like $40 to set up a table or something. And I brought, I think probably just an 800 XL and my wife's laptop with a SIO2 PC and an emulator running under Linux, and had a great time. The next year, I moved to Mountain View for work, so I went to the next one and the next one, so 7 and 8, and brought a 2600 and a Lynx, kind of spread out beyond the computer part because people seemed to think that was cool, and the kids that showed up liked playing the games. And then in 2006, end of 2006, our first son was due to be born. So I skipped the one in late 2006 and then again the one in 2007 because at that point we had basically an infant. So I missed VCF 9 and 10. So then 2008 rolls around and I go, oh boy, where's I thought there was supposed to be Vintage Computer Festival this year and it just never happened.
Right.
So I was having this itch, it's been a few years since I set up all my Ataris for people to poke on because I'd gotten used to doing it, 3 years in a row. And I asked around on Facebook. At that point, the Wii was relatively new, a couple of years out. Everyone was having Wii parties. Come over and play these 4-player games. Isn't that amazing? And I'm like, it's Warlords, man. You can get 2600 and you got 4 players right there. So I'm like, okay, if I had an Atari party, who'd show up? And a bunch of people on Facebook, high school friends I've never seen forever. Oh, totally, we'll come out for that. And I'm looking at my apartment going, okay, this is 860 square feet. Maybe I should move to a different venue. So I've got a computer club that I founded here in town, co-founded, the Linux user group here in town, and we meet monthly at the public library when we can. And I said, well, I'll use that space. So I signed up and I said, yeah, I'd like to use the library for a couple hours after you guys close because we're going to make some noise, do this Atari Party thing. And they're like, I don't know about this. I'm like, don't worry, I'll make it educational. I'll have guest speakers, and I'll, put out information and stuff. It's not just going to be goofing around. And, after hours came, 6 o'clock came around, library closed, and all these people showed up. We had like 80 people show up off the street. I did a little bit of advertising, but not much. I bought some brownies, or cupcakes. One of the cupcake places in town had a little binder, and one of the kind of cupcakes they can make was a Pac-Man shaped cupcake. So all the cupcakes were frosted with black, and then they do blue lines and Pac-Mans. I'm like, perfect. So we brought those. We might have had a pizza or something. I don't remember, but that was great. So I ended up doing that again. Let me see. So that was early 2009. I did the first Atari Party for 3 hours at the library, and it was mostly me with a couple people that decided to show up and help. One person that invited themselves at the very end was a fellow named Zach Matley, who's from Sacramento, right next door here. I think at the time he was like a elementary school teacher or something, or middle school. But he was a homebrew Atari 2600 game programmer. So he came there with all these games that he'd written that I hadn't actually seen because I never hung around Atari Age, but stuff that you can buy on Atari Age.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, damn, you're like right around the corner. So he came to a couple of them. He's not coming to this next one because I guess he's kind of gotten out of that and he got rid of all of his equipment, which is to me shocking. Like you're gonna regret it.
Right.
Gonna look back in your, I got rid of my Atari. But yeah, so let's see. So I did it again in 2009. And then, I'm sorry, the first one was early 2009, and then I did it again in 2010. And that year I had to spend some money, and we had some sponsors. I think Atari Magazines was one of them, and Atari Archives. You've heard of those guys, right?
Yeah. Fly-by-night outfits. I wouldn't trust them.
Yeah, I know. Sponsored and helped. Not only did we end up paying for a little venue, which was okay, but I'd rather have a free venue, obviously.
Sure.
But it turned out, and I learned this through a friend that I made at VCF, some guy that was always kind of set up next to me at VCF the couple of years I went. He knew that you could rent movies relatively cheaply to host at public events. Mm-hmm. So for I think, I want to say like $125, I rented Tron, the original 1982 Tron. And what was funny was the disc that came was exactly the same disc that I had at home.
But it had the license for public showing.
It said nothing on it. It's not at all. It was identical physically. But
did you just give like $175 to some guy in the street? He's like, yeah, here's your Tron.
No, but that was great. So the funny thing about
it's like on a CDR, it's written Tron and Sharpie.
Yeah, Chinese on there. Yeah, hot off the press. No. So this is before the new Tron movie came out. So Tron wasn't really in people's sights at that point. Like, I was excited about the new Tron coming out, the new Tron movie. I was actually a year off. I thought it was coming out late that year. It actually came out in, I think, 2011, right? I was disappointed when I looked at the calendar and said, Tron isn't coming out now. But so we played Tron at the end of the show, the party, and all the kids were glued to it. And all the parents were sitting behind them heckling it. Because it was Tron, right? I mean, it's a goofy movie from 1982, and the kids were shushing them. They were so pissed off. Shh, we're trying to watch. They were enthralled. So that was awesome. So then the next year, did it again. And at this point, these are going to be like day-long events, like 10 a.m. or 12 p.m. to like 5 or 6.
Right.
So 5 to 8 hours long probably. We were back at the library because they were closed for construction, and they refurbished the place. And we screened Cloak and Dagger because that's related to Atari, right?
Sure.
They got the 5200 cartridge as like the plot, the MacGuffin, whatever in the game. Not as good of a movie. Sorry, Tron is way better. If I ever wasted money on doing a movie screening again, I'll probably just do the original Tron again because that's just the best one. So then. At that point, we've got another baby due in early 2012. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to skip. I'm not going to plan anything for 2012. In the meantime, as I'm thinking here, I'm done with Atari Party for a year. I get a couple of public libraries in the area saying, "Oh, we heard about your Atari thing, and it sounds like it's great. And the Davis Library seems to love it. Can you come do like a retro gaming for teens thing? You can bring all your Ataris and whatever." And I go, okay. So basically, single-handedly, with my little, at the time it must have been, going on 5 years old, not even 5 years old yet, little boy, packing my equipment with me. I'd bring my Ataris and Nintendos and stuff to whatever random library. Some of them were kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Sacramento, and set it up for, a handful of teens to come have a good time for a couple hours. And that, those are like little super mini Atari parties, basically. Mm-hmm. But, so, okay, I did that. That's fine. I do that into early 2012. And then Digital Game Museum, which is an outfit out of Santa Clara, is where they're headquartered now. They're basically like an organization that collects and curates and archives and like seals perfectly so it withstands the test of time video game stuff like controllers and paraphernalia and game discs and manuals and stuff like that. And they've got this collection down there that they're growing, and they go out and exhibit some of it. Some of it's interactive, some of it's like, you know, a glass case with here's a bunch of controllers. I actually lent them a bunch of my Atari controllers because they didn't really have a very big collection. I'm like, I got trackballs and touchpads, and you can have all sorts of stuff for a weekend or whatever. And they brought that up to Penny Arcade. But anyway, so they said, we want to do an Atari party because it's Atari's 40th birthday, 2012, right? They were founded in 1972. And I'm like, oh my god, all right. They're like, don't worry, we'll take your wife to a spa or something. that didn't happen, but they basically ran the show. They put it together. They were really hoping to do it at the public library down there in Sunnyvale. They decided not to do such a thing, but I'll get to the next point soon. So they found a polytechnical college down there that has a lot of like art and video game stuff going on, and basically hosted us in this big kind of warehouse room, and we had all of DGM stuff. We had a couple arcade games, like an original like number 3 Pong, and like a computer space and stuff from way back in the day, and then all my gear and a bunch of other random gear, and some of it not Atari. We got televisions and Segas and stuff there. We had this huge party down there.
Right.
That was 2012.
That was I made it to that one. I remember because that was the same day, same weekend as California Extreme, and so I was in the Bay Area for that, and
that's right.
Convinced my friend to drive me over there, and so I got to see Atari Party for a bit.
Cool.
And that was awesome. I talked to I can't think of his name right now, the guy who programmed the in-store demo, and I met him there. And
that's right. Yeah.
And that was a fun day.
Yeah, and we had Al Alcorn there. That was actually what the library ended up doing for their little thing instead of the Atari Party back in 2012. Was just an Al Alcorn talk. So I was able to go down to that, which was pretty cool. Because I had a newborn at this point, you know. 2012, that's when the baby was born, so I had a newborn. I had to step out while all the panel speakers were going. So they had Al Alcorn, and I don't even remember who else, but they had a bunch of people from Atari. They had like a couple secretaries or something even, like just talking about the whole history of Atari way back in the day. So that was cool.
Was it Colleen and Candy, the hot secretaries?
Probably. Remember, Stella was a bike, all right? Stella was a bike. They just kind of went crazy after that. So anyway,
So you're doing it again this year?
Yeah, I did it again. I did it again at the library last year, but then this year, DGM's like, no, I'm sorry, not DGM. The library itself, the Sunnyvale Public Library. Somebody new there, some new librarian, is like, you got to come to your Atari Party. We'll pay you to come down. We'll put you up in a hotel and blah 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 blah. Basically, they have a budget that they need to burn through for it. Right. So I said, oh geez, all right. So that's really far away, and it's going to be hard. Like I can't guarantee that it's going to be more than just my like 5 Ataris. So. I'm really going to want to get help from DGM. So I asked Judith, my main contact and like the head honcho over at DGM, and she said, yeah, she'd totally help. So basically the 3 of us, Rachel at the library, Judith at DGM, and I have been trying to 3 cooks in a pot manage and organize this thing. And yeah, it's coming together. So that'll be on Saturday, June 14th, down to the Sunnyvale Public Library, not far from, say, Borregas Avenue or any of those other cool locations down there that you might want to go peer at and see where Atari was, where all those people were driving around and going to get their lunch and stuff when they were making the Pac-Mans and the ETs of the day.
Awesome.
Excuse me.
Are you have any speakers planned at this point?
So we've got Al Alcorn again. He's actually become, I guess, quite a friend with DGM. He's been there, like physically helping them with a Pong that they got donated to them, getting that up and running, and that might make an appearance at the show. But he's like the big keynote guest speaker, I guess you'd call it. And then Dan Kramer, who I was actually not really familiar with, but he was the guy that kind of championed the Atari home trackball controllers for the 2600 and XL-XE, and actually at that point it would have been 400 and 800, I guess, and the 5200 controller, which was the one I always ogled over in the Atari Age magazines. Oh, look at that game! It looks like Centipede at the arcade. So he's going to be there, and the cool thing with that, and he's going to be doing some guest speaking, but the cool thing with him is he's apparently got a warehouse just full of like rare items, prototypes and stuff, and he's just been digging through it like every couple of days, going, look what I found that I'm going to bring. So between DGM, who's going to have like an historical display, and Dan, we're going to have a lot of like interesting stuff just to look at, as well as obviously all the games to play. Oh, and another fellow who's helping out, you mentioned California Extreme. One of the guys that puts California Extreme together, Mark Bershing, I contacted him like through Facebook, basically saying, "Hello, I love California Extreme. Do you happen to know anyone who would bring arcade games?" And he's like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And then he starts like making offers. Oh, well, like I can bring these 4, and well, would you like this one instead? I got a friend that can bring this one. I'm like, okay, you're talking to like a kid in a candy store. You're trying to make me choose. Like, we got to stop this. You have to just bring whatever is easiest for you. Otherwise, I'm gonna go quantum. You got a quantum. Bring quantum. You know, like no, I don't want to. I don't want to make anybody work because this is all a volunteer thing, basically. So,
Right.
And I'm getting some lodging and transport, and I'm probably gonna have to rent a van because I can't fit my family and my Ataris all in the same car at the same time.
You have to choose. You have to.
And then I'll be alone with my Ataris forever.
That's right. No one to distract you from programming.
No, my wife is great because she knows that Atari was my first love. So.
Right.
And it still is. I actually gave my 1200 XL home a nice little pat today because my toddler kind of pulled it out like he was going to play it the other day, and I'm like, "Oh, you're still there."
So there's people listening to this who are nowhere near Sunnyvale, or are listening to this way off in the future. Hello to the future people. So my question for you is, they're going to think, sounds like a lot of fun, but I missed Atari Party or I can't go. I want to do this myself.
Excellent.
Can the average Atari user who just has a 400 in the basement, can an average person do this, and how?
If I can, you can. Yeah, I'm not like a super awesome coordinator, or like I'm not a great programmer or anything. Like I basically said, at the library, like, I want to put this thing together to just kind of give people some historical context and remind them of where stuff came from. And what happens is the people who are coming for nostalgia, like, I remember Pitfall, those guys come. And their kids come, going, "What's this Pitfall thing all about?" So yeah, I mean, if you've got some equipment, it's pretty easy, and you'll probably, once you start like talking about it, you'll find other people nearby who maybe you didn't know were there, like that Zach Matley fellow, or Jeremy Holloway, who I know on Facebook now is just some other Sacramentan Atari guy, Philip Louie in San Francisco. These people just kind of like, sure, I'll join. Basically, once you get the ball rolling, you end up getting a little bit of a snowball effect, and you get all these other people joining in. And sometimes people can't make it or can't show up or whatever, and you have to just water off a duck's back. But
it seems like it doesn't. What I like about the Atari Party feel is it doesn't have to be like a huge production.
Yep.
It's like you go to the Vintage Computer Fair. I just went to the VCF Southeast, and man, I mean, it was in a former Comp USA, and probably 10 to 15 people put on this thing, and it was a major production with there were lanyards and there were signs, and it was a little convention,
Yeah.
But you can just get a room at the library, put up some signs, and
you can spend zero money
play games for 3 hours and then go home.
My goal is to spend zero money. I think I spent maybe $60 last year, and I think part of that was like pizza, and the other part of it was like a couple of power strips, which are like tangible, which mean I can reuse them year after year. Like the intangible stuff can be really cheap, like post stuff on the local wiki website or event pages or whatever, and print some flyers, stick them up in the coffee shops, and set up a little free website somewhere. Facebook page. Facebook, everyone loves the Facebook, so, and that costs nothing to use except for your soul. So,
right.
So yeah, don't make it hard for yourself, and don't think you need to spend basically any amount of money to do it. Keep it simple. Just really keep it simple. So I helped with it was called the Linux Picnic down also in Sunnyvale back in the day. There was Linux 10, which was like the 10th anniversary of Linux, so that would have been 2001. And then after that, I think I came up with the name Picnics, kind of like the joke on Unix with a star, except for it was like a picnic for like all the Unixes, BSD and whatever. And I remember one year trying to help coordinate it, and people were just so freaked out about, like, well, we got to figure out where the T-shirts are going to come from, and who's going to design the picture on the logo of the T-shirt, and how are we going to pay for that, and how are we going to collect the money? And I'm like, Are we throwing a picnic or are we selling T-shirts? You gotta like focus. Like that is the cherry on top or the gravy or whatever. Like the movies, like I don't have to have it can be an Atari Party without a movie. It can be an Atari Party without guest speakers. It can be an Atari Party without prizes. I mean, this Atari Party is going to have guest speakers. It's not going to have movies. It's not going to have prizes. It's not going to have cupcakes. You know, these are all the things that you can kind of throw on top if you got the time and money. But basically, you just want to set up a bunch of games, make sure that you have people to man them, and make sure that nobody walks away with equipment. And that's about it. You'll have a couple hours of some really happy people showing up. So, and like I said, I single-handedly, with the help of a little 4-year-old, put together the ones, multiple systems for teenagers to come, and I just walk around and help them, like a little mini classroom at the library almost. So, like, here's how to play Pac-Man. That'd be an awesome job, being the teacher that teaches kids how to play Pac-Man. Okay, this morning, kids, we're going to learn Super Pac-Man. Now, you'll notice the keys.
Oh, come on. Teacher, don't make me.
Mr. Kendrick, we're bored with maze games. Stop munching maze. No. Well, we haven't gotten to Casey Munchkin yet. No.
So you keep mentioning Unixy things, which seems like a good transition to talk for a minute about Tux Paint.
Oh, yeah.
You created Tux Paint, correct?
Yes, I did.
And,
single-handedly. No, not at all single. I started it, but there's been an army of people helping me since then.
So I mean, if anyone has used a Linux Unixy sort of system for any amount of time, you probably are familiar with Tux Paint because it's probably built into your distro, and it's so when and why did you create it?
Okay, so let me backtrack. I had something that I'd mentioned to you before.
Yeah.
So I did the game Gem Drop, which everyone remembers as the best Atari game ever. No, it was a little game that I did in Action programming language back in like 98 or 97 or so, and it was based initially on me observing from a distance like the attract screen of of an arcade game. So I got it completely wrong. I did not understand the game mechanics at first until I went back the next week and
because you couldn't invest a quarter.
I couldn't invest a quarter. Yeah, the next week I put a quarter in and said, no, I did it all wrong. I got to do it over again. But basically, it's a game called Magical Drop. It's just a silly little puzzle game where you grab pieces from above and you try to throw them back and get matches of 3 before the thing fills in on you. So that I did on the Atari, and since I did it in Action, it was actually kind of trivial for me to port it to C. Kind of trivial. I did it. Let's put it this way: I did it as a college student. I mean, with going for a CS degree, so you would hope I'd be able to do something like that. But basically, I had like the X window version on Solaris running, basically the ported game, and then. When I left college, I was sitting there with my Atari 1200 XL and a couple 800 XLs and a PS2, and like that was my computers. And I no longer had access to like the Power Macs and the super fast Solaris machines and stuff at school because I was gone. So I ended up buying a rinky-dink little Pentium and sticking this new Linux thing that I'd just heard of because I was apparently like 7 or 8 years late. Stuck it on there. I mean, at least I missed the part where you had to like have 40 floppy disks to install it. I could just stick one CD in there and buy it at Fry's or whatever. I literally went to Fry's and bought like Red Hat for $40 or something. Right. Which is like these days I go, you pay for Linux? Who's ever heard of such a thing? But so I learned of a library called Simple Direct Media Library, SDL, which is super popular with the kids doing open source games. And they're actually the initial reason I used it was, I could do sound with this. This thing will let me do actual like sound effects that weren't me doing it really lamely under Linux or Solaris. And then I eventually realized that like it can do everything else that I was trying to do under X window, like keyboard input and drawing stuff on the screen in like full color rather than just like black and white or whatever. Right. So I ported it to SDL, and then from there I ended up basically like living in SDL for a while and doing tons and tons of little stupid games. I did a Defender clone. I did a Kaboom clone. And the interesting thing about Gem Drop, so it started life in Action on my Atari 1200 XL, got ported to X window and C, got ported to SDL, again under C. That version is now flying in the air on Virgin Airlines Red, they call it Red seat back entertainment system. So this game that like literally the first line of code was on Atari is now flying on these Linux servers up in the air like 10,000 feet or whatever. Which
awesome. So they license it from you, or is it open source?
No, it's open source. It's open source. Yeah, yeah. So based on all my knowledge and experience, one day I'm at my Linux user group, and a friend of mine at the time, his kids were like 4 and 7. He said, "Yeah, I installed Debian Junior." So Debian is one of the distros of Linux, and Junior was like just basically a set of packages that you can install. You say, if I want Debian Junior, it'll give you all the kid-related stuff that wouldn't normally get installed by default on your desktop because you're typically not a kid, right?
Right.
But the only paint program it had was the GIMP, and if people know the GIMP, then they know it's difficult. And if you don't know the GIMP, just think of Photoshop but difficult. And this is not something that's geared for 4 and 7-year-olds, right?
Right.
So I said, pshaw, I could do that. That'll be easy. I'll spend a couple days. I'll make a little paint.
I'm still hung up on Photoshop, but difficult.
But difficult,
but
yeah.
You mean even more difficult.
Even more difficult,
right.
Yes. GIMP was the only thing available for the kids, and I said, I'll remedy this. And I figured I'd spend a couple days working on it, and I did, and then some. And now it's been coming on 12 years since I started the project. And it's now in like approaching 100 languages. It just had a whole bunch of different Indian languages translations added to it.
Wow.
And stuff. So people are still digging it. It was yeah, but it doesn't just run on Linux. So don't get that idea just because it has that awesome penguin on there. It's also available for Windows all the way back to 95.
Wow.
We support Windows all the way back to 90. Some features are off, but if you have a machine that you seriously should not have running anymore,
it'll run Tux Paint.
It'll run Tux Paint and also Mac OS. So, and that's the awesome thing about the portability of the open source stuff. So I basically didn't have to think about it. I put the code out there, and other people came along and ported it for me. So
nice. Awesome. Cool. All right. So you had sent an email kind of about your history of Atari stuff, and I thought it was interesting that you said when you got your first Atari computer, it was because your brother had a Commodore 64 and didn't want your big brother had a C64 and didn't want you asking questions and like asking for games and stuff from him. So he insisted to your parents that you get a different kind of machine. Is that the story?
That is the story that I heard, I think, from my dad recently. Because I've kind of been, I kind of forgot the early years.
Is he into the Commodore now, like you were into Atari?
Oh God, no.
No.
I did buy him a D64 TV a while back. For him to hook up to the TV because he didn't have his Commodore stuff anymore. But he really was into it as a teenager, and that was he was about 5 or 6 years older than me. So so he was on the BBSs and downloading the wares and stuff, and I would just kind of like sit behind and be in awe of all this cool stuff going on, and I kind of seeing what the Commodore could do professionally, because I didn't have a lot of commercial software for the Atari. I'd have to like basically see what was in magazines and tell from that what the Atari could do, and obviously type in all the typing programs. Everyone our age has that story of having dad come in and help you do the data statements.
Yeah. Yes,
my dad eventually bought me this kind of like half-cylinder magnifying glass for old people, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That you just stick it on one line, it would just magnify that one line of text. So I just use it as my like bookmark as I'd go down. I think that was a subtle sign that he was sick of reading data numbers to me for 5 minutes at a time.
Oh, okay. So I found recently some old tiny microcassette tapes too, and I knew it was on one of them. I went on this trip with my dad when I was in 6th grade, and I like recorded like a diary of what we did every day. I knew that would
awesome.
be there. So I had to get a microcassette player, and I went on Amazon. I found one like brand new for $10, and I digitized that thing. And then there was a second tape. I didn't know what was on.
Did you put it on vinyl after that? No,
not yet. So the second tape, I didn't know what was on it, and it's mostly just I don't even know what it is. It's just like gibberish, and I don't know, just kids fooling around. But there's this one part of it. It's like a 5-minute section of me reading data statements, and I guess
so you dictate to yourself to type them in?
I record them and then go want to type them in later, or maybe give them to my dad to have him type. I don't know what I was thinking, but and then once I heard it, I remembered I was doing this like after bedtime, so I'm like whispering the numbers like. So it's like 3 minutes of me going 85, comma 142, comma 256, comma 256, comma 256. So, it's mortifying. It's just like terrible. So yes, typing in data statements.
Yeah, those were the days. Kids are never going to understand that. They show those kids like trying to figure out how to use a Commodore and a tape deck and stuff. It's like, that's nothing. That's nothing compared to what we actually had to go through. I'm sure the people who are older than us who like had to do the dip switches and punch cards and stuff just want to smack us when we say this. But
Right.
yeah, it's come a long way. It goes real fast too. It's amazing. I mean, I got this computer that boots up in like 12 seconds. I mean, the Atari boots up in 12 seconds too, depending on what you're doing. But but this has a lot more stuff going on after 12 seconds.
So you wrote all this stuff back in the day when you were a kid, and then you grew up and you found your dad found the discs, and they're all online now, right? I mean, you got your whole history of your misspent youth is now downloadable and documented.
Oh, only the good and slightly embarrassing stuff, not the truly horrible waste of time. Why would I put this online stuff?
What's your tell me about your worst thing that you didn't put online that's embarrassing. I'll tell you mine when.
Probably like REM statements of love letters or something.
I didn't. Hold on. I'm sorry. Say it. I something happened with Skype. I didn't hear you.
REM statements of like love letters or declarations of love to girls or something.
Nice.
Not my wife. Sorry, wife. By the time I met her, I was doing the action programming language.
You were doing C type comment love letters.
Hexadecimal.
/*. I love you. // Right. Cool.
But yeah, no. So I put a bunch of that up online. I call it Bill Kendrick's Atari Relics or something like that, and it's a mishmash because for a couple of reasons. One, I was just going through. Well, one, when you use these discs, you're always like, as a kid, you're like, well, crap, I don't have $10 to buy another pack of 10 discs. I got to find like 4K somewhere, and then I need another 12 sectors to save this thing somewhere. So you just find some old disc and stick it on the back, and all of a sudden you got 1987 mixed with 1992, and then you come back 14 years later and you go, what the hell is all this stuff?
Right. Game.bas. Like, thanks a lot. Passed me.
Yeah. No, well, I always had the dream of like, I'm going to do this professional. I'm going to have Atari games that you could buy, and like I'll have like my disc catalog or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'd follow the lead of the Nintendo games that were hot at the time and have like the title screen with the copyright date and all that other cool stuff on there. or worse yet, this is the embarrassing part, when I'd see like the demo scene stuff, the crack-tros, the intros that the crackers would stick on the beginning of their cracked games on the Commodore 64 with all the cool scrollers, and I do this horrible coarse scrolling with like the rainbow color effect and and like I don't know what the hell I was going on about, but basically I was just an idiot kid. So although I guess I don't read Polish or Czech, so I have no idea what kind of idiotic stuff those guys were saying when they were teenagers either. But yeah, so I put a bunch of that stuff online. There was one gem, and it was what was it, 1990 I think. Happened upon probably a Commodore book of my brother's, or Commodore magazine of my brother's, and there was a game called Isolation for the C64 BASIC in that, and I basically ported it or rewrote it or something for the Atari, and it was actually pretty okay. I mean, it being based on somebody else's like published work, of course it would be better than what I'd just come up with myself, trying to pretend I'm a Nintendo programmer or something. But somehow I forgot that I did that. So by the time I got a modem like a year later, it was lost to history until I dug it up like in the past year, and I went, oh my god, I remember this. and I actually used it as the basis of one of my NoMam competition entries, which you were familiar with because you participated in as well. So I tried doing a 10-line version of that simple little game. It's basically a multiplayer. Suppose like the theme was a ship battle. It makes absolutely no sense because you're shooting at the water because you can't shoot at the other ships because they'd explode or something. Was the premise of the C64 game. So the objective is to move your ship around so that you don't get trapped, but at the same time shoot near your opponents to trap them, and that is hence why it's called Isolation. But yeah, I was able to cram that down into 10 lines somehow.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that was a fun contest. I went
So
absolutely nuts with that contest.
so you of the 40 entries, you wrote 9 of them. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
embarrassing. I had to guarantee that I'd win something. No, I guess my toddler must have been sleeping better at night for a while. He isn't lately. He's been up to all hours again lately. He's got while I had one molar out, he's had like 4 molars coming in. So
Yeah.
we're both crying about our
That's a
teeth lately.
that's the circle of life right there.
Could have saved him some time and gave him my wisdom tooth. But
No, I mean, I only wrote 3 programs, and I mean, it was totally addictive for me for a couple of weeks. It was just like I would like lie in bed thinking like, oh yeah, could do that, or I found,
Oh, I'm glad I wasn't the only one because I'd have to hop out of bed and go write something down. Like, oh, what if I do this bitwise operator thing? Like all these like goofy things that I don't use in work. That's the thing. At work, I'm doing web stuff. I'm doing PHP. I got to make it super readable for all my other coworkers. Make it make sense. It does not have to perform fast. It does not have to be small. It just needs to work right and be readable. And this is like exactly the opposite. Like cram it as small as you can and make it make as little sense as possible and obfuscate it as much as you can. And that was super fun. So I actually came up with a tool. I only used it once, which would let me edit so that I could sit next to my wife on the sofa and watch TV and at the same time play Atari, quote unquote. But write the program in a text editor on my Linux box. And basically I had a set of scripts, PHP because that's what I do at work. But basically, a makefile and a set of scripts that would take the ASCII text, convert it to a ASCII text, and then fire up the Atari emulator on my Linux box, which would boot into a disk that would read the listing, do the enter command on that listing, and basically replace the program with that new version off the disk. And basically, I could edit some text on my Linux box and hit a button, and like 5 seconds later, I'd have it running in Turbo Basic on my laptop, which was
Awesome.
super fun.
Sort of a cross compiler ish.
Well, in that I'm forcing the emulator to do all the work for me. But yeah,
Right.
basically, kind of yeah. I mean, it's not.
Neat.
It's a lot less fancy than it sounds like it is, but it was fun, and I love the enter command in Basic. I used to use the enter command for game levels, so I'd have all my game code from like line 0 to 30,000 or whatever, however much I would fit in there, and then everything beyond that would be like some screens for like a RPG game. And then when I wanted to have a new level, I would just basically enter a new set of lines with new screens on them. And because I had no idea how to do data storage or how to like read bytes back and forth very quickly, it was all beep 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 beep,
Right.
one git at a time with a poke, and it would take 5 minutes to load a font. So that I would take advantage of that one little thing that Basic gave to me, that untokenized save mode and load mode. But yeah, not the kind of stuff you use at work.
No. So since the No Ma'am contest is over, how have you been occupying yourself Atari wise?
Oh, preparing for the Atari Party for the most part.
Sure.
Stressing out about that, and well, because I stress out about it. You don't have to stress out about it. I'm stressing out about it because I need to figure out how the hell I'm going to get down there with all my stuff. But I think I'm gonna rent a van or something. But yeah, no, it should be a lot of fun, and it'll be interesting to see how it works out with the library basically kind of running the show rather than me, infesting the library, which is what I do here in Davis. Basically, they have a public meeting room, and I just say like, I'm going to borrow that room for 3 hours, and they say, well, nobody else wants it, you can have it.
Right.
As long as you're not selling anything. Oh, that's the other thing with the Atari Party. It's not like a typical show that you'd go to and there'd be dealers and stuff. There's nothing for sale.
Yeah.
Because again, that keeps it simple. Because then I don't have to collect any money from anybody. There's no taxes, and the library doesn't want that. Like I couldn't use the library if anything was being sold there. So
Right.
that would mean I would have to spend money on a venue somewhere. So keeping it simple is the best way to get it to actually happen.
Sure. So, I want to go back to the No Ma'am thing. Of the programs you wrote, like which one? I don't know if that's the same question or not. Which one are you most proud of? Which one, if a listener is going to take the time to check out one of your programs from No Ma'am, which one should they look at?
I was proud of Mini Zhong, my Mahjong, aka Shanghai game, because I'd never done one before and I really wanted to, and I somehow was able to cram it in there. There's, I think, a slight bug that I posted a fix for, or I should post a fix for, but But it's the most like obvious and playable game. I did a couple games that are just bizarre, like definitely not going to win, but it was fun to make something kind of experimental. I tried making a Boulder Dash game, which worked, but it was super slow and boring. Um, I made a game based off of a Nepalese board game, which I don't think very many people know about. So that probably wasn't very interesting to people, but it was fun for me to finally do that because I saw it actually right next door to my office here. They just moved, but for many years, right next door was a Tibetan store, and that's where I first saw the game Bog Chal. And I looked at that and I said, I'll make that on my game website that I put together years ago. And I never did. And then finally, this was kind of like my opportunity, like, all right, cram it, see if I can make it in 10 lines. and I did. I mean, you need two players. That's the only thing. There's no AI. Like, there's never going to be AI in a 10 line game, I think. But yeah, so which one won? One of mine won second place. Yeah, my maze game, which was a take on a hidden maze, which I remember seeing in Compute magazine back in the day. And that's where I learned, like, wow, computers can make mazes pretty easily.
No, I haven't looked at that one yet, but I will.
Yeah, I had to go back and look at my list. I forgot what I wrote because it was kind of a whirlwind. A couple weeks there where it was just like every night writing something new and people freaking out like, Bill, you've written all the games so far. Well, the thing I did is I posted not just like, the download, but I actually put the source code up on the web page, and I tried to explain, line 10 does this, basically like you would do back in the day in a type-in game, like in a Compute magazine or Compute Antec book or whatever, to explain to the reader what it does. And it's especially important when you're obfuscating it like this and making it so small. I would not have been able to go back and understood what I did without having my own kind of notes that I spent the next 2 hours writing. Like I'd spend a couple hours writing the game, then I'd go back and go, quick, before I forget, what the hell did I just do? So.
Cool.
But yeah, I was looking back, getting ready for this interview, going, boy, I've basically lived Atari my entire life and like never stopped doing it. I see people say like, boy, you're into retro stuff. And it's like, no, I just never stopped. I'm sorry. Like, it's not retro to me. It's still the thing I do. I never got out of it. It's not, I mean, sure, there's some nostalgia for the stuff that I didn't get into or didn't have an opportunity to play with and stuff. Like, I really wanted the Lynx when I first saw it, and I didn't get one until years after the fact, like maybe 10 years after it was dead. But I was really happy to get one. But I don't think of myself as like into retro or a collector of any sort. Like, that's the one thing with the Atari Party is I need to be careful. I've got some of these games. I go, man, this game's a piece of crap. I should get rid of this. Oh, but I should keep it for Atari Party so that other people can see it. And I go, oh, I gotta not do that too often. Otherwise, I'll turn into one of those collector guys that needs to have one of everything. But I don't care about new in box or with manual or whatever. Like, if I can find a game for 50 cents at the comic book store, which I've done many times, I'll grab and check it out. And if I don't like it, I'll just donate it anywhere else or give it away at an Atari Party as part of a package. That's the thing. One of the years we had immense game packages. I mean, one kid won, some little 11-year-old kid or 10-year-old kid won a 1200 XL, like with a disk drive and all this other goodies and stuff. And it's like, boy, I hope he gets some use out of it because that's kind of a coveted machine. But yeah, I mean, I gave away some, an 800 and a couple disk drives and cartridges and stuff, and I just basically like whatever spare junk I had collected because that's the other thing. Like once I started doing these, people knew me as this is that guy that runs the Atari Party. Get an email, hey Bill, I'm getting rid of all my Atari stuff. Come to Sacramento and pick up this giant box and load your car full of every piece of documentation about Atari 4th that ever existed. Apparently was. That's what one guy was totally into. I had all this weird documentation about stuff that I barely knew existed back then. I ended up donating most of that to somebody. But yeah, all the bits that worked, I kind of packaged together into giveaway prize packages and basically had like a free raffle.
Awesome.
But again, not something you have to do to run a show like that. I've done a lot. I hopefully haven't wasted my life too much on the Atari, but it seems like it's kind of had a revival ever since the internet kind of took off everywhere and Facebook. There seems to be still a big crowd out here. I mean, hey, there's a podcast now. There didn't used to be, right?
Right.
for specifically for the 8-bits. That's the thing. So there's Atari Age, and Atari Age is super popular, but I never really got into it because I wasn't like a 2600 homebrew person. I wasn't really, I love my 2600, but I'm not going to spend tons of money on it.
Right.
But the 8-bit was what I really totally fell in love with. While I wasn't looking, all of a sudden there became this huge community of 8-bit users and developers and all this other stuff going on over on Atari Age. And I go, oh crap, I'm totally out. Like, where did this Space Harrier game come from? What is all some stuff that people are doing that I've been kind of like not paying attention to? Because I was on CompSys Atari 8-bit, but it was kind of dying, and eventually my ISP stopped doing Usenet, so I've kind of like fell off the face of that one finally, after kind of stick it out for as long as possible. But I'd be kind of like the guy in CS8 going like, "Hey guys, look at this cool demo that just came out from Europe," and like everybody would be like, "Oh, whatever." So I think there's other communities that are more into that, and like I said, Facebook really kind of brings it together because you get a lot of cross posting and cross pollination of stuff. Like,
sure,
you see something cool over on the Atari Museum thing that's related to the 8-bit, you post to the 8-bit group and so forth.
So if you could send a message to the listeners, to the Atari community, and tell them something, which you can right now, what would you tell them?
Be nice to your 1200 XLs. I heard a horror story. You want to hear a real quick horror story?
Yeah, tell me a horror story.
So there's a Davis Makerspace literally around the corner from my office, and there's a fellow there that I know from the Linux user group that I actually had him help me fix my SIO2 SD. Had a cable coming out, so he soldered it for me because I'm totally not electronically inclined, software guy only, right? So we're chatting there, and I bring my 1200, or I'm sorry, my 800 XL there, so I can at least like boot it up and see if the screen lights up and make sure that like it looks like DOS can work and read and write and so forth, even without a TV set or monitor. So he's talking about that, and he said that back in the day, he was into some of the Atari stuff, and at one point later on, he worked at a company where like one of the VPs said, "Hey, has anybody got old 8-bit computer stuff that you can bring in? I'll put it up as kind of like art in my office in here." People are like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever." They come back later and they see that he's literally bolted it to the wall. Like,
no.
Bolts going through the machines. Like, these people thought they were lending him their computers and they were going to get them back. Maybe he was going to put them up on a shelf like a little display or whatever. No, he literally bolted it poorly, apparently. Like, the bolts were showing. Like, right through a 1200. And I just cried out in pain when I heard that part of the show. I'm like, no, those are the best ones. So, yeah, treat your old computers nice. They'll treat you well.
All right. Bill Kendrick is the father of Atari Party and creator of XL-Search, which we didn't even talk about, and prolific author of 10-line programs. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was fun.